Hi class, this is Dr. Karsten and I'm going to be going over the Lesson 3 review. This is from Grade 4, Unit 1. So let's get started. I just want to mention that the angle of the paper might seem a little weird, but it's just helping the camera to focus, so just roll with it. Alright, number 1. Which numbers have been rounded correctly to the nearest 10,000? So that's important. We're rounding to the nearest 10,000. And then we have to choose all correct answers. Remember that when we see a problem like this, we know that there are probably going to be more than one correct answer. So let's take a look here. So we have to take 14,500 and round it to the nearest 10,000. I know that I always tell you this. Please remember this. Don't just do it in your head. Go ahead and do each one of these. So I'm going to go ahead and do it and see which one's correct. So if I have 14,500 and I'm rounding it to the nearest 10,000, remember our technique. I'm going to circle the number that I'm rounding to, in this case the place value I'm rounding to. In this case it's 10,000. So if you forget where these are, you could always go 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. So it's right here. So 1 is in the 10,000s place. And then I look next door. Remember our rule, 5 or more, raise the score, 4 or less, let it rest. Remember when we're doing 5 or more, raise the score. That means that we have 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 4 or less is 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Remember when we raise something, it gets bigger. When we raise our hand, it goes up higher. When we raise a pet, it gets larger. So when something's being raised, it gets bigger. When we let something rest, remember, we just leave it alone. We don't change it. So for example, if your grown-up at home is resting, don't wake them up. Just leave them alone. Don't try to change them. Just let them rest. Leave them alone. They stay the same. All right, so let's take a look at what's happening with this example. So I can see that I have a 4, so that would be 4 or less, let it rest, which means that I am going to leave that 1 alone. I'm going to let it rest. It stays the same. And everything to the right becomes a 0 because 0 is my friend. And remember, when we are rounding or estimating, we are trying to make our math easier to work with. And zeros help make math a whole lot easier. It's my best friend number. I'm always telling you that. So again, this was for A. So let's take a look. And is A correct? Was this correctly rounded to the nearest 10,000? It sure was. So I'm going to go ahead and circle A. And I'm done. No, I'm not. Don't stop. Remember, all the correct answers. We have to find all of them. So let's keep going. So let's try the next one. So the next one's going to be B. And for B, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I have 159,202, and I'm rounding it to the nearest 10,000. So we already know this is our 10,000s. But if you forgot that, again, you could write ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. I'm going to look next door, and what I see is that I have a 9. A 9 definitely is part of that 5 or more. Raise the score. So I'm going to raise that 5. It's going to get bigger. It's going to turn into a 6. Now, on the left, don't lose that 100,000. Remember what we always say, if you worked at a bank and you lost the numbers to the left, you would get fired. You'd get in a lot of trouble. We don't want that to happen. So don't lose that 100,000. It's still there. And all the numbers to the right are going to become zeros. And now we have correctly rounded 159,202 to the nearest 10,000. And that would be 160,000. Did they do it correctly here? They absolutely did not. That is wrong. They rounded it to the nearest 1,000. Next one. So let's do C, and for C, we are going to go ahead, actually I might as well go down here. For C, we are going to round 534,996 to the nearest 10,000. I'm going to circle my 10,000 place. I'm looking next door, and what do I see? I see a 4. So what that 4 is telling me right now is 4 or less, let it rest, which means I'm going to leave that 3 alone. I'm not changing it. I'm letting it rest. The 5 stays the same, and everything to the right becomes a 0, my buddy. All right, so let's see, did they do it correctly? They sure did. Circle that one. That one's correct. All right, next one. All right, so now we're going to do D. So for D, we're looking at 786,234, and I want to again round it to the nearest 10,000, so I circle the 10,000s place and I look next door, and I see a 6. Remember, 5 or more, raise the score. 6 is definitely part of that 5 or more, so now I know I have to raise the score. So that 8 has to become a 9. So remember, the 7 stays, don't lose that 7, but everything to the right becomes a 0 because we're rounding, we're estimating, and 0 is our friend. So let's see, did they do it correctly? Nope, take a look. They rounded it to 780,000, so they did not raise the score. That one is wrong. All right, let's do the next one. So let's do E. I'm gonna, I don't want to slide it up because I feel like we have important information here, so I'm going to go ahead and put E right here. So for E, we're going to take 38,210, and we're going to again round it to the nearest 10,000, so I circle the 10,000 place, and I look next door. And I see that I have an 8. 8 is definitely more than 5. Remember, 5 or more, raise the score. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm going to raise that 3 to a 4. And there's nothing to the left, but everything to the right is going to become a 0. So did they do it correctly? Let's go take a look. 38,210 became 38,000. That's not right. We needed 40,000. That one's wrong for this problem. So again, here they messed it up. What they did was they rounded it to the nearest 1,000. So that was another mistake. We needed to go to the nearest 10,000. So let's take a look at F. And F is going to be the last one here. And I am going to go ahead and put F right here underneath F, so it'll be nice and clear. So for F, we have 810,499. I'm going to round it to the nearest 10,000. And if I look next door, there's a 0. 0 is part of the 4 or less let it rest group. So I'm going to let it rest. I'm not going to change that 1. I just leave it alone. I don't change it at all. I keep everything to the left. Don't lose that 800,000. And everything to the right gets a 0. So did they do it correctly? No, there's only 2 correct answers for this particular example. Now on the test, I don't know if there's 2. There could be more. There could be less. Well, there's going to be correct answers, so I guarantee there'll be 2 or more. All right, so let's move on and take a look at the rest of the questions. Okay, so for this question, let me try moving it over just a little, get a little bit more clear. There we go. So it says round 603,054 to each place value given below. Write your answers in the blank. So I'm actually going to do it. And again, I always recommend that you do this. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do each one of these. So first I'm going to write the number, 603,054, and I'm going to round it to the nearest 100,000. So I have to find my 100,000 place value. Ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s. So this is the place value that I'm rounding. So now I'm going to go ahead and look next door. And remember our rule, 5 or more, raise the score, 4 or less, let it rest. So when I take a look at that 0, I know that that's part of the 4 or less. So the 6 is just going to go ahead and rest. Nothing's going to change. And everything to the right becomes a 0. So the correct answer for A is just going to be 600,000. All right, let's do the next one. So for answer choice B, we're starting with the same number. So we're starting with 603,054, but now I'm going to round it to the nearest 10,000. So ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. So the 0 is what I'm interested in. And when I look next door, 3 is definitely in the 4 or less category. 3 is less than 4. So I'm going to let that 0 rest. I'm going to keep everything to the left, and everything to the right is going to become a 0. Look at that, we got the same answer. How wild is that? Doing two different roundings. All right, next one. So for answer choice C, we're going to start with the same number, 603,054. And now we're going to round it to the nearest thousand. So I'm going to go ahead and circle my thousands place. Ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. And I'm going to look next door. And again, we have a 0. Remember, 0 is part of the 4 or less crew. So 4 or less, let it rest. I'm going to let that 3 rest. Don't lose any numbers to the left. Keep them all. But everything to the right becomes a 0 because 0 is my friend and makes my math easy. That's why I'm estimating or rounding. And so that's going to be my answer, 603,000. All right, last one. So for D, I'm going to again write the number because that's always where we start. So we have 603,054. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to round it to the nearest hundred. So I have my ones, my tens, my hundreds. I'm going to look next door, and I have a 5. 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. So since I have that 5, and that means I raise the score, 5 or more, raise the score, that 0 has to get bigger, just like raising your hand, and your hand goes up higher. It's going to get higher or bigger. So that 0 becomes a 1. That's the next available, or the next number after 0. Don't lose any of those numbers to the left. You got to keep them all. But to the right, they become zeros. So my new answer is going to be 603,100. All right, let's keep going. Next problem. So I kind of like these. These are like little treasure hunts, I feel like, this kind of a question. Now, we did one of these yesterday during math, and so hopefully you're feeling pretty confident about it. So let's take a look. So it says Josephine is thinking of a number. When the number is rounded to the nearest thousand, it is 4,000. When the number is rounded to the nearest hundred, it's 3,800. Don't worry about that part yet. Let's just first worry about this. Which letter shows the location of this didn't get changed. This should say Josephine's. I hope you guys didn't even notice that. Number on the number line. Okay, so here we go. So if I'm taking a look at this, let's just look at this number line and let's notice some stuff. So first of all, I can see my endpoints are 3,000 and 4,000. And that's because initially we're rounding to the nearest thousand. So those are my endpoints. So one of these is going to have to be my number. So I just want to mark off these endpoints for us to make them more clear. 3,000, 4,000, and this was 3,500. Because remember, the halfway is going to be a 5 in that place value next door. Why is that? Because from 3,000 to 4,000 is 1,000, and half of 1,000 is 500. Well, remember, we just look to the next place value, and we can say, 5 would bring us halfway there. All right, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at these. So which of these numbers would round to when they round to the nearest thousand would be 4,000? So they have to round to 4,000, which means they have to be closer to 4,000 than they are to 3,000, which means they've gone past the halfway point. They're past that 3,500, so they have to be over here somewhere. So that's telling me that it has to be R or S. So I'm going to get rid of P and Q, since I know for this problem it has to round to 4,000. So now let's go ahead and let's take a look at that second part. It says when the number is rounded to the nearest hundred, it's 3,800. So again, we have our endpoints, 3,000 and 4,000, and then in between is going to be all my hundreds. And I know that because 100 is the next place value. So I have 3,000 with no hundreds, and I have 3,100, 3,200, 3,300, 3,400, 3,500, 3,600, 3,700, 3,800 is right there. which one of these do you think, when rounded to the nearest hundred, so these marks right here, which one of those is going to round to 3,800? I hope that you are all saying S. Look how close S is to that. Clearly it would round to that. It is so close to that 3,800. If I look at R is going to round to 3,700. It's super close to that. So R is now gone, and S is the correct answer. And so we're going to go ahead and circle choice D. All right, next one. Look at this. Oop, that was one of my kids sneezing. Gesundheit. Determine whether each number has been rounded to the nearest 1,000, nearest 10,000, or nearest 100,000. So let's take a look at this. Now there could be one slight trick, but for the most part, these are going to be kind of easy to do. I'm going to show you the shortcut, but then I want to show you what I would do if I were taking a quiz. The shortcut's fine, but I want to be really careful because it is a quiz. So here's the shortcut. If I'm looking at this number, 467,338, and it was rounded to 570,000, I can just look at what place value it was rounded to by looking at where that last digit is. This is the tricky one, but where that last digit is. And if I look at this, what I can see is that the last place value is in the 10,000s. And again, we can do this. 1, 10, 100, 1,000. And I'm making them super tiny to fit. 10,000, 100,000. So again, super tiny, but just so you can see. So this one ends in the 10,000. So my guess would be that this one was probably rounded to the nearest 10,000. So, I'm gonna just put a mark there for now. But if I were taking a test, I would probably go ahead and I would quick solve it for myself. And I would write it down, even if it's just on scratch paper somewhere, although I love to see your work. So since my hunch is that it's the nearest 10,000, I'm going to try that out and see if that works. So if I circle my 10,000s place and I look next door, I see that I'm going to raise the score. 7 is definitely in the 5 or more group. So this becomes a 7. This stays a 5, and everything else is a 0. And that matches. So we were right. Our guess was right. So let's try another one. So let's take a look at this one, 432,199. So my guess is, let's look, it ended in the thousands place right here. You can see that's my last digit greater than 0. So my hunch is that it's going to be the nearest 1,000. So I'm just going to put a little line under there to let me know that's my hunch. And then I'm going to try it out. So I'm going to take that number, 432,199, and I'm going to round it to the nearest 1,000. So I'm going to circle that 1,000, look next door. 1 is definitely in the 4 or less group. So 4 or less, let it rest. So I'm going to let that 2 rest. I'm not going to change it. Everything to the left stays the same, and everything to the right becomes a 0. And look, it matches. So we were right. We did round it to the nearest 1,000. All right, let's try the next one. So we're going to do 123,141. So my guess, when I look at this, is that my last digit is in the 100,000s place. You can see that right there. So this is my guess, but let's try it out. So I have 123,141, and I'm rounding it to the nearest 100,000. That's our guess. And when I look next door, I see a 2. Remember, 2 is part of the 4 or less crew. So I'm going to let it rest. 4 or less, let it rest. The 1 stays the same, and everything to the right becomes a 0 because 0 is my friend. Did it work? It did. Look, they match. 100,000, 100,000. So we were right again. Good job, guys. All right, and the next one. So now let me take a look. 261,756 was rounded to 262,000. So my guess is that they rounded it to the nearest 1,000. So I'm going to put my line there. That's my guess. And I'm going to do it myself. So we're starting with 261,756. We're rounding to the nearest 1,000. We're going to try that. So I circle it. I look next door, 7 or more. Raise the score. So that 1 is going to raise to a 2. I keep everything to the left. Ooh, and then everything to the right becomes a 0 because 0 is the whole point. It's my friend. It makes math easier. So let's go ahead and take a look. And look, they match, 262,000. So we were right again. So again, I showed you a shortcut, but I also really want you guys to check your work and make sure that you're getting these right. And I think you guys were able to see this one before when I did that one, I'm pretty sure. All right, my friends, we are on the last question. Oh, I hope you guys are paying really close attention. Show your work. You must show your work for this problem. You can't just give me an answer. You have to show me or explain to me how you got it. And we have to make sure we answer all the questions that might be in here. So let's take a look. A company makes 635,081 Chromebooks in 1 year. To the nearest thousand, how many Chromebooks does the company make? Oh, let me go find that important information. A company makes 635,081 Chromebooks in 1 year. To the nearest thousand, how many Chromebooks does the company make? So let's see, how am I going to do this one? Well, I always start by writing down the number. So let's start there. So I have 635,081. And I want to round that to the nearest thousand. So I'm going to round it. I'm going to circle my digit that's in the thousands place. Now again, we like to be really careful. This is a great way to be careful. Ones, tens, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000. Ooh! Oh my goodness! I totally just messed that up. All right, I'm going to write it. I guess I don't have room to write it above. Let me change colors. Here we go. Ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s. Oh my goodness. This is why pencils have erasers and I should be using a pencil, but you can't see it very well, so that's why I use the markers. Okay, my friends, so here we go. We are rounding to the nearest thousand. So I'm going to circle my thousands. And then I'm going to look next door. And there's a 0. So remember, when we have a 0, what do we know? 0 is part of the 4 or less, let it rest, right? And I can write that. 4 or less, let it rest. 0 is part of that. 4 or less would be 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. If I were doing the other thing, it would be 5 or more, raise the score, and I would write 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But you don't have to do this part. You can just write 4 or less, let it rest, or 5 or more, raise the score. So 4 or less, let it rest. So I'm going to let that 5 rest. Everything to the left stays the same, and I make zeros to the right. So now we want to answer the question. So we want to write a sentence of some sort to answer the question. So we're going to restate it. So it says to the nearest thousand, how many Chromebooks does the company make? We're going to say the company makes, and we should say to the nearest thousand, the company makes, so let me do that, to the nearest thousand, the company makes, and then I'm going to write this number, 635,000 Chromebooks. Okay, so we're doing great here. So now I know that some of you really like to use the number line, so I do want to also show this using a number line. So if you guys are good and you feel like you know what you're doing, you guys are welcome to hit stop. But here I just want to show you, if you were doing a number line, what you would do. So let's go ahead and, you know what, I'm just going to kind of make a line here to separate these two possibilities. Okay, so remember, our original number is 635,081, And if I wanted to find my two endpoints, again, we're rounding to the nearest 1,000. So my two endpoints would be 635,000. Remember, that's the let it rest. And the raise the score would be the other option. And remember that halfway between would be 635,500. And so you're welcome to go ahead and do this. Oop, I feel like my page, I think I must have bumped the thing. There we go. All right, so, oh, my printer is leaking a little bit of yellow. Excuse the little dots all running down here. All right, so I'm going to put my two endpoints on. So I have my 635,000. I have my 636,000. And in the middle, I would have 635,500. And now what we have to do is we have to figure out where is 635,081. Where would that go? So I'm going to go ahead and put in, remember we look at the place value next door and it's the hundreds. I'm going to put all those hundreds in there. I'm just trying to space them out evenly. So this is 635,000, this is 635,100, 635,200, 635,300, 635,400, etc., etc. So 635,000, it doesn't even have 100. It hasn't even made it to this first 100. It's actually going to be right about here, 635,081. And what you see is that it has not made it past the halfway mark, the 635,500, because half of 1,000 is 500. It hasn't made it past that to get up to that 636,000. It is much, much closer to that 635,000. So that's why we would say that it would round to 635,000. So that's that other way of doing this. I know some of you really prefer to use the number line, and that is absolutely fine. Or you could just explain it. And again, the whole point of this 5 or more raise the score, 4 or less let it rest, is because when you get to the 5, you've reached this halfway point. So this would be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those all would raise the score. But 4 or less would be closer to this side. Remember, everything down here would round this way, and everything starting with the 5 would round up. So starting with the 5 right here, everything from here would round on up. So remember, and that's because this is that halfway point. Everything here is closer to the 6. Everything from here on down is closer to the 5,000. So just remember that that's why we have 4 or less let it rest. That means all the things down here, or 5 or more raise the score means we go up to that 6,000. All right, I hope this was helpful. Remember, for the test, we are okay if you do it this way. So that's fine. If you have any questions, you can ask me. You will have the opportunity before the quiz. And it's not a test, it's just a quiz. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions there too. But I think you guys are all going to do really, really, really well. So I will see you in the morning in our Google Classroom. Have a great night, everyone.